My clients Ben and Sarah came into the office recently. They're 60 years old and are at a point where they're seriously starting to think about retirement. But with the $1.5 million they've worked so hard to save up over their lives, they want to be sure they're making the best planning decisions. In this video, we'll walk through their full financial plan, uncovering their retirement goals and the different spending options they'll have with the money they've worked so hard to save up. Hi, I'm Josh Palmer, Director of Financial Planning with the Noble Group. I'm a certified financial planner and have more than 2 decades of experience in the financial industry. Now, before we dive into Ben and Sarah's plan, I want to emphasize that you don't have to be in the exact same situation as Ben and Sarah to watch this video. The process I walk through with them is the exact same process we'd walk through with any client, regardless of age or portfolio value. But by looking at a specific plan, we found it's much easier for people to visualize the process and what it might look like for themselves. So first, let's take a look at what we're working with in terms of assets. Ben is making about $140,000 a year and has $700,000 in his 401k, of which he's contributing 10% of income and a Roth IRA of $60,000. Sarah is making about $95,000 per year and has a 401k of $400,000, contributing 5% of income and a Roth of about $30,000. They have $60,000 in savings and a joint investment account of about $250,000. And according to their budget, they currently spend about $10,000 per month. In every situation like this, the first thing that I want to do is sit with the client and really understand what they want retirement to look like. Think of it this way. The first day you're retired, what are you going to do? Are you getting on a plane and traveling? Are you sitting on the front porch drinking coffee and reading the paper? Are you going to a part-time job at the golf course? What does that first day look like to you? I also like to think of retirement as work optional, a goal of getting to a place where you go to work because you want to, not because you have to. So we started this exercise with Ben and Sarah, asking when they wanted to retire. They both enjoy their jobs and thought maybe they could make it to 65. They arrived at age 65 because that's when they could start Medicare, and they hadn't really thought about what it would look like if they retired before Medicare. One thing to remember is that if you retire before 65, which is when Medicare eligibility begins for most people, your health insurance has to come from somewhere else. And that could be a substantial planning cost. So in this case, for Ben and Sarah, we set age 65 as the retirement date. Once we determine the start date, we then look at how much we're going to spend. Ben and Sarah actually helped us understand this quite well. They had kept a pretty detailed spreadsheet showing that they needed about $6,000 per month for a comfortable retirement. They also wanted to look at getting a new car every 5 to 7 years. They figured that they could trade in their cars for about $10,000 in value, and they'd like another $25,000 on top of that. They also talked about how they enjoyed to travel. So we decided to build in a $10,000 per year travel budget for their first 20 years of retirement. Then we looked at their retirement income. In their case, it'll be Social Security. Based on their current combined income of $235,000, we estimate their total benefit to be approximately $78,000 per year in $2025. Once we know all this information, their goals, their assets, their savings, and their retirement income, we want to put this all together and see if they can retire at 65 and spend what they need to spend to have an enjoyable retirement. With our first run through the program, where we simulate 1,000 trials of varying market returns, we see that Ben and Sarah are in a good spot to retire at 65, with a median ending asset value of $2.1 million. What I like to focus in on this chart, though, are the ranges of outcomes. You can see that with a high degree of certainty, Ben and Sarah could retire at 65, spend $6,000 per month, buy a new car every 5 years, and have a travel budget for the first 20 years of retirement, and at age 90, we still have between $1.3 million and $3.2 million. This is all assuming their current asset allocation mix of 65% equities and 35% fixed income. Now, the program assumes that this portfolio mix could net an annual return of 6.2%, and we all know they won't achieve this exact return every year. Some years they could get a higher return, some years a lower return. Because we use varying risk and return numbers, and because the market doesn't achieve straight line growth, The probability of success and confidence scores are very important here. But just as important is the fact that we evaluate this plan at least annually. We want to make sure that we are accountable to the plan and not the investments. We want to make sure Ben and Sarah have the information to make decisions based on the plan and not the portfolio. We have seen too many times when people let their emotions run the way they invest. In a down month or quarter, it's easy to bail on the asset plan and sell out to stop the bleeding. When a plan is in place, we've already planned for downturns in the market. It is very possible that the market downturn is one of the 1,000 trials we've already run. So as we do with all planning clients, we meet on a regular basis to make sure that no matter what the portfolio is doing, the plan is on pace. If there's a bad month and the plan still shows a high level of confidence, it's easier to stay on target. All right, back to Ben and Sarah. Here's a little closer look at that plan. Using the median trial of returns, you can see the growth of the portfolio until retirement, as Ben and Sarah continue to grow their portfolio with planned savings and their asset allocation until 2029. When they retire that year, the withdrawals from the portfolio are greater as their entire income is supported by investments until they turn 67. At that point, Social Security comes into play and they can reduce the pull from the investments and allow them to grow until age 73, when the IRS will make them start to take required minimum distributions. Using our simulated average returns, this should leave them with just over $2.15 million. From here, I look at the cash flow for the next 10 years and their projected withdrawal rate. What's interesting here is the positive cash flow pre-retirement. You can see that there is approximately $35,000 to $40,000 per year of unsaved cash flows. This tells me two things. One, they have a fairly substantial amount of excess they could be saving for their retirement or even some planning for their grandkids' educations. Or two, their spending budget is missing a few things. This might mean that they could need more than the $6,000 they told me they need during retirement. For now, we're going to assume that these dollars are spent. The cash flow echoes the investment portfolio. The first 2 years of retirement, Ben and Sarah's retirement is fully funded by investments. At age 67, most of their retirement income needs are funded by Social Security, and the pull from the portfolio drops substantially. This is shown in the withdrawal rate page. For retirement to be successful by asset definition, we have shown the withdrawal rate needs to be between 3.5% and 4.5%. When Ben and Sarah retire at 65, as shown in the portfolio summary and the cash flow, we pull from the portfolio about 4.5% to 5%. May seem a little high, but look at the next 8 years. Withdrawals from the portfolio range between 0.5% and 1.5%. In 2040, the IRS requires the RMDs, but the pull from the portfolio is still below 4%. These are good-looking charts and allows us some of the fun parts of planning. When I see a high level of confidence, there are really two things we can explore. One, do you want to retire earlier? Or two, do you want to spend more? In this case, I asked Ben and Sarah those questions, and they said, let's run the numbers. So let's see what it would look like at 65 if they wanted to spend $8,000 per month instead. That increase in spending would cost them, on average, less than $400,000 over the course of their lives. Then they told me they were curious what an earlier retirement age would look like for them, and if it was possible, they would actually prefer this over increased spending. So I showed them what would happen if they retired at 60. Since this is the more desired variable, let's spend some time here. Using the same analysis, we could have a high degree of confidence that retiring at 60 on $6,000 per month would result in between $700,000 and $1.9 million in end-of-life assets. The median ending balance is about $1.2 million. So what do all these numbers mean? It means that while it could cost them about $915,000 over their lifetimes, they could, with still a very high level of confidence, retire today. Let's continue to dig into the weeds. As before, the success of the plan is dependent on the rate of withdrawal from the portfolio. The withdrawal rate of retiring early looks a little different. In this proposed scenario, Ben and Sarah must pull a larger portion of the portfolio to fund both earlier retirement expenses and added healthcare costs pre-Medicare. The withdrawal rate is high early on, and if we continued at the rate for longer than the 7 years shown, it could have an impact on their long-range outcomes. However, we follow those years up with 8 years of very low portfolio withdrawals. Many of those years, except when Ben and Sarah buy a car, we see that the pull rate is less than 1%. Even with the onset of RMDs at 73, the rate of withdrawal is still below 4%. This is why planning is so important. Ben and Sarah would have never thought retiring at 60 would be possible because they'd have to pull so much so early. They didn't see the longer-term forecast showing that they could make that higher rate up by taking less when Social Security begins. So we covered a ton of information about Ben and Sarah. We showed them that they could retire at 65 on $6,000 per month with their current assets. But we also showed them that they could walk away today if they wanted. What a good day for Ben and Sarah. They now know that they may not be retired per definition, but they are officially work optional. Besides being work optional, the planning playbook is open wide now. If they want to continue to work, we could possibly de-risk their portfolio. We could move them to a lower risk profile, maybe add more fixed income to their mix and therefore reduce volatility. In this example, we could give up an estimated 0.4% of return to reduce the volatility by over 18%. We could look at tax planning too. With low effective tax rates, we could take advantage of strategies like Roth conversions or RMD planning that could save us some taxable assets for later while drawing down some of the assets that we will be required to draw down and pay taxes on at 73. So what does this mean for Ben and Sarah, and what does this mean for you? No matter how much you have in your nest egg, no matter how much you need in retirement, and no matter when you want to retire, you need a plan. Ben and Sarah walked away with huge smiles on their faces, knowing that they were now work optional, something they would have never thought when they came in. They were just hoping they could make it to 65 and have enough to live on, afford some cars every once in a while, and travel some. They left with a renewed confidence, and that's what planning does. You may not be in the same situation as Ben and Sarah, but you can walk away from the exercise having a confidence that somehow, some way it can work. If you want to walk through this process with us, reach out to us to schedule a complimentary strategy session. Just give us a call or shoot us an email. We'll be happy to chat, whether online or in person at one of our offices. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.